Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the February Team Studio TLCC webinar. I'd like to welcome our speakers, Paul Delanebbia and Howard Greenberg from TLCC, who will be presenting today's topic, creating a great XPages user interface. I'm Courtney Carter. I'm the inbound marketing specialist at Team Studio and your co-host today. Before we start talking about today's topic, I'll be taking a few minutes to tell you about Team Studio and who we are and what we do, and then I'll be passing the controls over to Howard at TLCC. Before we get started, just a few administrative things I'd like to cover. We're expecting quite a few attendees today, so to protect your privacy, the attendee list isn't public. You're all muted during this session, so participation will be through the chat window and Q&A panel. We're doing Q&A at the end of the session, but you're welcome to ask your question at any point in the Q&A panel, and we'll get to it once the formal presentation has concluded. This session is being recorded, and I'll send you the link in a follow-up email in a few days. So a little bit about us. We may have assisted you in the past with application development. We've been delivering innovative developer tools and productivity tools to the Notes and Domino community since 1996, where we specialize in source code control, version management, and source code management. And we moved into the application arena in 2010 with Unplugged. Unplugged gives you the ability to extend your Notes app out to mobile devices. The unique thing about Unplugged is that it leverages the powerful technology of XPages and provides a native app experience for the user. And these apps have the capability to function when offline. You may have heard we recently released Unplugged 3.0. This new version runs apps twice as fast, and development of apps is easier than ever. We're very proud to have been the recipient of 2 IBM Collaboration Solutions Awards for Unplugged in 2013 and 2014. Last month at the Connect conference, IBM awarded Unplugged with the Best of Show and Chief Technology Officer Award. This product is available on the major mobile platforms, including BlackBerry, Android, and iOS. In addition to Unplugged as a platform, which allows clients to create custom mobile applications that meet their own specifications, we provide off-the-shelf templates like Team Studio Continuity and OneView Approvals. We recently announced an additional template named Customer View. This is a lightweight mobile CRM solution for your field workforce. With this, users have the ability to view, edit, and manage customer information, and also have access to large media files. Unplugged works on all the major platforms, and we'd be happy to arrange a demo to show you how these tools work. Just contact me during this webinar or contact us directly from our website or by phone. So our next Team Studio TLCC webinar will be next month on March 13th. I believe Howard has some information up about this webinar on their TLCC website, but stay tuned for a registration link. Our next Wireless Wednesdays webinar series will pick back up with part 2 on March 5th. This 4-part free monthly series presented by Matt White will guide developers through Notes and Domino mobile development. Part 2 takes a deep dive into IBM Dojo mobile controls. Check out our website for more information and to register for this event. And finally, check out the promotion we're currently running on Customer View, an Unplugged template app, and be entered to win an iPad mini. Click on the banner on our homepage for more information or reach out to me directly. And with that, I would like to pass the presentation back to Howard at TLCC so he can tell you a little bit about TLCC, and then we'll go ahead and get started with today's topic. So over to you, Howard.
Thank you, Courtney. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Greetings from nice 70-degree, I'd say sunny Florida, but that would be a lie, it's cloudy. But at least it's not snowing, and so my sympathies go out to those on the East Coast who are experiencing this nice winter storm I see on the news. Let's see, I need to share my screen here. So I'm Howard Greenberg, and my partner, Paul Delanebbia, will be co-presenting and co-hosting today. And so today's topic is going to be creating a great XPages user interface. And this is really going to be kind of a part, because a key part of creating a great XPages user interface is the application layout control, and we're going to cover that next month. A little bit about TLCC before you get started. Most of you are probably aware of us. We've been around since 1997. We just do Notes and Domino training, and we've been doing XPages training since the very early days when it first came out. All our courses are self-paced, so you take them using your Notes and Domino Designer or Administrator client. And we also can do on-site private classes, as well as we can help you with consulting and mentoring services with your own applications. Probably one of our most popular courses is our free demo course. It's actually a very complete 2 to 3 hour course on Introduction to XPages. So if anyone on the webinar today hasn't really dived into XPages yet, hasn't started, just go to our website and give that a go. It's a great way to get an introduction to XPages. Right now, we're having a sale in honor of the Winter Olympics, and it's we got some really great deals out there. You got the link you'll get in the slides, and that goes through the end of the month. So most of our popular XPages courses and packages are on sale. So check that out. As Courtney mentioned, the next webinar will be March 13th, same time. That will again be with myself and Paul. And that's going to concentrate on the application layout control, which we're only going to really touch on briefly in this webinar, just due to time constraints. Another great resource is at the same link. You'll find a link to all our previous webinars going back about a couple of years. So there's some great resources there. So definitely check that out, especially for those of you stuck in your house today on a nice cold winter day. For those of you in Europe, just want to give a shout out to a conference that Theo runs the last couple of years. It used to be called the Blood Conference, the Belgian Lotus User Group. Now it's called the Engage User Conference, as the Belgium and Netherlands user groups have merged. It's going to be March 16th and 17th. There's some really great sessions. They were just announced yesterday. The best thing is this is all free. 2 days of sessions and as well as opening sessions by some IBM folks. And TLCC will be doing an extra day of training on March 18th, the day after, with a topic called Rapid XPages Development, which is basically going to cover a lot of the material we have in our 4-day course, which you get as part of the tuition. So for the 450 euros, for this day of training, you're going to get a course that right now we have on sale for $600, plus a full day of training at the event. So check that out if you're in the Belgium, Netherlands, Europe area. If you have questions at the end, we will handle your questions, but go ahead and ask your questions as they come up. To do that, there's a Q&A pane in the WebEx interface. It's you should see the little Q&A button. You can click on that and ask your questions. Do not use the chat. We prefer that you use the Q&A pane for any questions that we will again respond verbally at the end of the webinar. Okay, so let's get started. Our goal is to make your XPages look better. So if you're just starting out, your XPages apps might look something like this. You know, you put a view panel on your XPage, and then we have our view. And just the way our notes applications have worked for the last 20 years, you open your documents up from the view, and then we can go into edit mode, and we have a combination of edit boxes and check boxes and dialog list here. So it's kind of that notes paradigm where we have a view and then we open up a document in a different window and then we close that and return back to the view. So what we want to do is start to move away from that paradigm and use some of the controls from the extension library that are now built into Domino 9. So what we did is take the same application and we put it into the other applications that we use in our company in this case, a customer's application, sales application, and parts application. So those are accessible with these tabs at the top. And on the left side is a way we can navigate among our customer's application. So in this case, we only have two views, and we can click on, again, we can click on a document and open it up. But now we're displaying the information using some different controls, one of them being the form table I'm going to talk about next, as well as we added a dialog here. So we can click on a link and you can see all the sales for this particular customer. And let's go, if we go back and create a new customer, we actually have some different controls we're using here in the form table where we can give the user a prompt to enter some information. So we can help them out, tell them what kind of information we want to put in. We have some type ahead now, so we can start typing in, let's say, Florida, gets filled in for us. Here we have a zip code, and if I start putting in the wrong information, it will give me a little warning right away. So a little different than using the display errors control that we might have been using, where the user had to submit the form first to see the server-side errors. Here we have the phone. Again, if we don't put the right characters in, it will give us a warning as we're typing. And the contact, and same with the email, it has to be in a certain format. And then here we have a spinner where we can, instead of typing in the number, we can use the spinner to enter a number. We got the region and a type, and then we also have a view picker here to select the products that the customer might be interested in selling. So that's using a view picker, and then it puts those into what's called a Dojo list text box, which we can remove by clicking on the little X. And so I can submit that and save it, and so that saves our customer. So what we're going to talk about today is a lot of those controls that I just demonstrated. So before we get into that, let's a little bit on what you need to be able to use this stuff. If you're using 853, you need to have the extension library. You can get that from either OpenNTF or from IBM. If you get it from IBM, it's called the Update Pack 1. In terms of which one to use, IBM's Update Pack 1 is supported by IBM. That's the good news. The bad news is it hasn't been updated for, I think, since it came out, which might have been well over a year ago. So it hasn't had any bug fixes, anything like that applied to it. So I would highly suggest using the OpenNTF extension library. You're going to need to install this on your Domino server. There's a couple of different ways to do that. The instructions are to do so are all in the extension library to download. You're going to need to install it in your designer client. And if you're using XPages in the Notes client, otherwise known as Xpink, you're going to need to install it on all your Notes clients, which doesn't sound as bad as it is, because you can use the update site database to roll those out to all your customers, or clients, I should say. If you're using Notes and Domino 9, the good news is you don't have to install anything. Everything you need is already in the server, the designer, and the Notes client. The only thing extra you would need that we're going to show today is we're going to do a quick demo of the Bootstrap for XPages plugin. And so then you would have to install that, that optional library. Okay, so once you do that, the other thing you probably will have to do in your application is most of the, many of the controls we're going to show you today use the IBM One UI theme. So you'll have to use the IBM One UI theme. In particular, the application layout control and the form table will need those. And the other thing you'll have to do is set to use the extension library in the XSP properties file. That will be set for you automatically as soon as you add a control from the extension library to your XPage. But that will be shown on line 3. If you look at the source code of your XSP properties, it will add what's on line 3, the extension library. And then you also see on line 5, we're using an IBM One UI theme in this case. Okay, so let's dive into the form table control. And the form table control is a way to create an area for both editing and reading. That's going to be nicely formatted for you. Another nice thing about the form table is that all your validation errors will appear automatically. And so you don't have to set up a display error control or display errors control on your page. That is going to happen automatically, and the error messages can appear summarized at the top of the form table, or they can appear next to each control that has the error, or you can do both. There's a header area and a footer area that you can add content to, and then you can also set up your labels next to your input controls, and you can have those either above or to the left of the input controls. Any of your controls that are required will automatically get a asterisk next to the label to indicate that they're required. And you can also set up multiple columns, as you can see in the image we have here. So let's take a look at how we can use the form table. So I got a XPage open here right now. I have some controls on here that are in a table format, which would be similar to if you went to the Data tab and dragged over some controls, it automatically creates for you the labels and puts them in a table along with the actual edit box controls. So let's say you had done that, but now you want to use a form table. So what you're going to do is go over to the extension library section of the controls. You can go over to form table, drag that onto your page. Okay, so now we have our form table, and it has 3 little green dots. Those are called facets, and a facet is an area where we can add content to. So before we add any content to this, let's go ahead and set up a title. So let's say this is going to be for my customer, and then we'll say details for customer. Okay, so we'll set up our form title and form description. Now, we have a header area and a footer area, but where we're going to want to put our rows and columns is in the middle area, which doesn't have a name. And what I can do is I'm just going to add some rows right now. I'm going to add a couple rows to my middle area, and I'll add 3 rows. Oops, that one didn't get there. Okay, so now I have 3 rows in my form table, and you see that each row has more green dots, more facets. There's a help, a label, and one that's not doesn't have a title. Forget about the help one. That's not doesn't really do anything. The label one, we can add a label to it. So you can add a label control or some other type of control, but you don't really have to do that. Let's start off by adding my edit box control for the customer to the rightmost facet in my row. And then I'm going to click on my row, and in my properties, I can give it a label. So I don't need a label control just to give it a text label. I can just go right to my label property and set the label I want to use. So I'll do the same for the other controls as well. Put in these 3 controls that I had already on the page. I'll just drag them into the rightmost facet for each row. And then I can delete this table now. Then I'll go ahead and set the label for these other ones and the address. Okay, so the last thing I need to do is I need to supply the navigation. So we have a submit button already. That's in a panel. The reason it's in a panel is because in our footer area, which is where I'm going to put this panel, we can only have 1 control. But that 1 control can be a panel, and in that panel we have multiple controls. So now I'm all set with my form table. I got 3 rows. I got my footer area with a button. And let's go ahead and preview this. And so we have our form table, and we have our submit button. And when I click on submit, something didn't work right here. Let's see what happened. That doesn't, okay, there we go. That looks better. Okay, so we have our title for our form table, our details. We have our 3 fields with labels, and notice the labels have our asterisk next to it. And when I click submit without entering information, we automatically get our errors, our error messages, and we got it summarized at the top, and then we also got an error message next to each row, each field that had the validation error. So I can go back to my form table, and I can go to all properties, and I can control if I want that error summary at the top. Let's say I want to turn that off. So I'll disable error summary is equal to true. And now if I go back to my browser and refresh and submit it, now I don't get the summary of the errors at the top. I just get the error messages to the left of the actual control that had the error. And so you have a lot of control as to where the labels appear, and if you want the labels to be to the top or above it or to the left, or even turn off the labels. Let's go look at another example of form table. It's a little more complicated. This form table here, you see, has, in addition to a bunch of rows, it has columns. So our form layout control, let's look at this first in the browser. You see that we have 3 columns. And when I submit it, you know, we have our error messages. Actually, this is not the one I wanted to show. But we have our error messages would show up, you know, like before. But what I want to show you here is, let me open up a different XPage. So it's the wrong one. And this is the one I wanted to show. Okay, so when I open, look at the source of this XPage, we have our form table right here. And inside the form table, we have our columns. So here we added columns, and then inside the columns, we have our rows. So to set up multiple columns, it's all we have to do is use the form column control, and inside the form column control, add whatever rows need to be inside of that column. So in this case, we have 3 columns. Here's the second one, and here's the third one. And then we have a footer area with our buttons, and then we have a header facet that we're not using. So with the multiple columns, it looks like this. And if I were to submit it, we have our errors that we summarize at the top. So we've actually turned off the validation errors on each control. Okay, so just to kind of review, one of the things I talked about is I mentioned the word facet. And a facet is a place that we can add controls to another control. Okay, so you remember that in that form table, that middle area didn't have a name. And so I can have as many controls inside that unnamed facet as I want. So the other way of doing it is when you have a named facet, which would be like the footer area, then it's going to use the XP key to indicate where that control is attached to. And we can only have one control inside a named facet area. So you're going to see this a lot on custom, especially on custom controls. So you can actually create a custom control that has a place that when someone uses your custom control, you can allow that developer to add other controls into it. And just what happens in the source, again, when we have a named facet, it adds inside our panel, which is what we added inside this facet, XP:key equals footer to indicate that this panel will be inside the footer area of the form table control. Okay, I'm going to switch things over to Paul, and Paul's going to pick up with the data view.
Thank you, Howard. And some of you are asking questions in the Q&A area, and do continue to do that. So we'll pick up your questions at the end, but as they come up, go ahead and put them in the question and area or Q&A area, and we'll get to those a little later. Okay, in this section, we're going to take a look at the data view control, which certainly is my favorite control for displaying a domino view. And this slide is showing us a core view panel control on the left and a data view control on the right. So the data view control provides some nice user interface and rendering. Basically, it does require One UI version 2.1, but it certainly has some nice visual effects. But there are many functional enhancements as well with the data view. For instance, there's a more pronounced summary column or links column to open up the underlying documents. You can show some additional details for each view entry in your view. We can see that there are more pages available, so you actually have 6 pager facets, as Howard said. Facets are areas within a control that you can add in design elements. So there are 6 facet areas for pagers. And with Release 9 and the extension library, there are some new pagers. So there are actually 6 pagers that were introduced with the extension library. Each one will have its own specific functionality, like pager detail. We can see that in the, well, we don't see it in this image. We see a pager detail is to toggle those details for each view entry. Pager sizes, we see that in this image. To specify or to choose how many documents you want to show per page or how many view entries per page. Pager expand to expand, collapse all of the rows and categories. And my favorite, pager save state. So not really a paging type pager. What this does is it allows, or when it's added to any of your iterator controls, so that could be a data view control, a view panel control, repeat, a data table. What it does is it saves the state of the view that the user left it in for their user session. So if they had certain categories expanded and some collapsed and they went to page 4, when they open up a document, the state of that view is saved for the next time they return to that document. Now, let's see some demonstrations. And I'm not sure if Howard mentioned this, but all of the demonstrations you'll be able to download from our site along with this presentation. So we're going to take a look at the 151 demonstrations. And here in Designer, I can see some of the demonstration applications that you can download from our site. Okay, so there's an XPages application, and then there are some applications just for serving up some data. So a sales application, customer and parts application. So all of the demos, or most of the demos you're going to see are going to be in this JMP 102 XPages application, and we're going to take a look at a couple of the 1.5 demonstrations. So I have a pair of XPages, 151 data view, and also 151 input. Okay, so one for showing the data or the view, and one for showing the document information. So in this data view, I can see it rendered here in Designer. I see green dots indicating that that's an unused facet area. So if I wanted to, I could drop in a pager into my middle area, my pager top area. Some of these are already used. So I've got a hide show details pager in the top left, and just a common pager or a core pager in the top right, and so on. Also, we can see the pager save state in pager bottom. That's the visual Designer indication for that pager save state control. So let's see what this looks like in a browser. And a couple of things. One is I have a more pronounced links column that I can use to open up one of the documents, and now I'm seeing the 151 input page, so I can return to that page with my data view. I can individually expand or collapse to show the details. I've got this pager to show or hide all of the details. I can show more or less view entries per page. Okay, so a couple of things here. Now let's explore that page or save state. So if I expand a couple of these on page 1, and then maybe go to page 4 and expand a couple of more view entries, and then open up the sports check view entry and return to my view, I am returned to page 4 with those two view entries expanded, and on page 1, the state of that view page is also stored for me as well, or saved for me as well. So great control, that page or save state. And what I want to do now is just show you how easy it is to recreate this data view control. So I'm going to use this pair of XPages. This 152 XPage is already complete. It has a form table to display the contents of the document. And this 152 XPage, I'm going to add a data view control to it. Okay, so you add it from the extension library. Now, I already have a view 1 Domino view data source defined on this XPage, so I'll just select that. And that's to the customer by name view in our customers application. So I'll select that as my data source for my data view control. And I'm going to check off some of the properties for my data view. I do want to show column titles. I do want to allow for collapsing of details. And I need to specify which XPage to use to open up the document. So I'll specify demo 152 input to open up the documents. In my properties, I'm going to set a couple of my data properties. I'm going to specify that I want to show 10 view entries per page and open the documents in read-only mode. And at this point, I can try this out. So I'll just save that. And it's there. I can see 10 rows is very, very faint, but not very good. I certainly need to show at least one column in my view. Now, the one column that you must specify in your data view control is the summary column. And these columns are added in the format area in the all properties. So in my format area, I can add my summary column. That's going to be my links column. And I can see in my data tab, the column that I want to display is that customer, or that customer column, which is called customer. So I'll specify that. And I'm also going to add at least one pager control to this, just a core pager control into the top right-hand corner. Okay, so I'll save that, return to my browser, and refresh. A little better. Okay, see my pager. I have my links column, my summary column. I can click on that to open up one of the documents, and I can return to my view, and it returns to my 152 data view XPage. Okay, so a couple of other things. Would like to add some additional columns for contact and phone number. So that's also easy to do. And once again, in your format area, there is an extra columns property. And to that, I can add in as many extra columns as I want. So one for the contact, maybe give that a title of contact. And I'll add another extra column for the phone. Okay, so we'll save that and refresh. And there's a result. Now, since the underlying contact column in my Domino view data source is sortable, it's also sortable in my data view control, just like when using a core view panel control. Okay, next thing I want to work on is showing these details. Okay, so to do that, the first step is I need a variable to address each view entry in my Domino view. So in my data view control, in its data properties, I'm going to specify that var as view entry, something that represents each object in my view, each notes view entry in my view. So I can address each view entry, and now what I want to show are things like the address and the city and the state for each of those. So to do that, I'm going to work in the detail facet area. Anything you put in the detail facet area shows in that expandable area within your data view panel. So I'm going to start out with a panel control and drag that into my detail facet area. And then since I'm only displaying information, I'm going to drag in a computed field control. And the value for that, I'm going to use the expression language and use my variable view entry to address the view entry dot address. And that's all I need to do to show the address. Now, while I'm here, I'm going to expand this. And I'm actually going to work in the source here. It's a little quicker. Okay, so I've got my expression language, view entry address. And one nice thing about the expression language is you can concatenate it with string values, which I'm doing here, and just going to change that to view entry, city, and state. Okay, and if you don't use the expression language, I do encourage you to take a look at our last webinar where we covered Java and we covered the expression language as well. So let's preview that. And I'm getting these little gizmos to expand the details, and now I'm seeing the address, city, and state for each of those entries. Okay, so very easy to provide additional details, and you can provide information there or any functionality. So into that detail facet area, you might want to provide a link or a dialog box for some in-view editing. So we'll get back to that, but really a very powerful part of the data view control. So just going to add some pagers. So I talked about some additional pagers that are available to you. So these are in the extension library area. So I might add a pager to show or hide the details. You know, I might add a pager sizes here to the pager bottom left facet. And the really exciting one, that pager save state. Okay, so I do want to save the state of the view when the user leaves this view. Now, there's another part of this, and that is in the page that returns to this view. So in the 152 input page, any action that returns to the view, and we have a cancel action or return to view action, what I need to do is I need to restore the state of the view state bean. So the pager save state control simply saves the state of the view state bean for each user session. And restore state, setting that to true, will restore it and then returning XSP success, which is basically the navigation rule to return back to my 152 data view page. So let's try that out. Okay, so now when I refresh my view, expand a couple of things on page 1, go to page 5, maybe expand one of these and open the other and return to my view, I'm back on page 5 and the state of my view on page 1 is restored as well. So easy to use and really some very nice functionality. So a couple of other things I'd like to demonstrate. Okay, one more demonstration, this 154 demonstration. Now notice this 154 demonstration has a data view, but we don't have a corresponding input XPage. Because all of the functionality for this particular application is delivered right in the data view. And what I see in this data view is it has as a data source for my data view the customer by name view in the customers application, but we also have in the detail facet area a view panel. And that view panel has as a source the sales order by customer view in our sales application. So a different view here. This is being filtered, and if I take a look at the filtering formula, it is simply view entry sales.customer, basically the name of the customer. So from that sales order by customer view, I want to filter that view just to show the sales orders for the particular customer. So let's take a look at that. And that's what we're seeing when I expand the details here. And I've actually put some code underneath these links so that when they're clicked on, we're not opening up another X page, we're just expanding or collapsing them. But what we're seeing is we're seeing a view panel, a core view panel control embedded within a data view control. So in relational speak, this is kind of like a table join, but really a quite powerful one. So delivering all of the functionality, this is information-only functionality on a single X page. And this is a fully functional view panel control. I can switch to the pages, to see all of the orders for that particular customer. Now, one last feature for the data view control. I'm wasting a lot of space here. One feature of the data view control is you can specify to show your data view in multiple columns. So this multi-column count, set that to 2. I'm going to save that. And now I'm seeing 2 columns. I can specify 3, 4, whatever is appropriate. So very powerful data view control. Howard, I think it's over to you.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Okay, so switching gears for a second. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. So switching gears for a second, we're going to talk about some of the controls we put on our X page to help us with editing. And so those are under the Dojo form controls section in Domino Designer. So what these do, what these provide you over the standard controls is just a way to really make your X page a lot more usable. The other nice thing is that these are all built on Dojo, which is all client-side JavaScript. So that means to do your validation and some of the other functionality doesn't require communications with the server. So that's going to improve your performance and improve the user functionality or happiness, I guess you could say, because things are going to happen right away in the browser. They're not going to have to wait for something to get returned back to the browser. And these kind of fall into 2 different areas. Some of these controls really just take a edit box control and add extra functionality to it, whereas some controls are entirely new, like we have the ability to do a slider or that spinner that I showed you before. So that's a completely new functionality that you'll get. So let's look at a couple of these. The first one is the validation text box. And so this we saw before. It's a way to immediately validate your text entry. And so the user can be either required to enter some data, or we can use a regular expression to validate our content. And they're going to get immediate feedback. You're not going to have any JavaScript alerts like you would with the standard client-side validation that's used in the edit box control. So let's go look at this. So one thing to point out is that some of the validators will still use the error message control. This isn't going to replace all your validators. And so some of the validators that are server-side will still need the display error control. Okay, so here we have a validation text box. We actually have 2 of them. Again, these are under the Dojo form drawer in your controls. And so you just drag it over like any other control. Once you do that, all of these settings are going to be done in the all properties. So there's nothing really in the first tab of our properties. You're going to come to all properties to do all the settings of all the properties. And the first control we're doing here, that's all we did was say this is required. So we set required equals true. And we put in a prompt message that the user will see, as well as an invalid message if it's not valid. and then we bind it to our data. Now, the second control we have here is also a Dojo validation text box, but here we use a regular expression. So the idea here is that we want to validate a zip code, and we're keeping it simple. It just has to be a 5-digit zip code. So we put our regular expression into the regex exp property. So if you don't know regular expressions, it's a good thing to learn, but a nice thing in Domino Designer is we have this little box here to launch a regular expression editor. So you can go compose your regular expression, and then we can test it. So in the case of a 5-digit zip code, we're going to want to only have numeric characters, digits. And we're going to want those 5 times. So we'll click on repeat and say we want it 5 times. We'll click add. So there's my regular expression. When I click next, I can then test my regular expression. So for 5, if I put in 5 digits, it tells me that I passed the regular expression. If I put in more digits, it fails. Less digits, it fails. Or if I use a character other than a number, it fails. So that's working the way I want it. So I'll click finish, and it will fill in the regular expression right into my XPage. All right, let's go see how these work in the browser. For the first one, as soon as I put my cursor in there, it will give me a prompt. So I want to enter a value. If I don't put a value in there, I just go to the next control. It will give me that little error message. And so I got to come back and put in a required value here. So here, the second one is our regular expression. So if I start typing things in, if it doesn't pass the validation, it will display the invalid message. And as soon as it passes the validation, those messages go away. And then when I switch over to read mode, it'll save the document and just display the data. Okay. Another control is the combo box and filtering select. These are very similar. They're both going to give you a type ahead and also give you the ability to have a drop-down selection. The only difference is that the Dojo combo box will let the user type in a value, whereas the Dojo filtering select, they have to select one of the supplied values. Either they type it in or they use the drop-down, but in the end, it has to be one of the values in the list. We can also support, just like our other controls, our normal XPages controls, like the dialog list, we could also do label value pairs, and this will automatically do our validation as well as provide prompts. So the way we're going to create these is I got a couple on the page. Again, we got under Dojo form, we got our filtering select, and then we got our Dojo combo box. So the combo box is up here. We have our properties, and we put in a prompt. Now notice that there's no tab here. Like in our regular combo box, we have a tab for the values. But in the combo box and the filtering select, we don't have that. What we have to do is go over to the source and supply the select items. So the best way to get these is create a normal combo box. And then go to your values tab and create whatever you want to create, whether you hard-code in the values or use computed values. And that will generate the select items, which you can then copy over to your Dojo combo box, and you put in, basically, you just put that in between the opening and the closing tag. And that will supply the items that the user is going to be able to select from. In this case, we are doing an @db column to a view in this database. Okay, then we have the filtering select. It's basically the same thing. We'll just see how that works differently. Another thing you can do is, let's just go see how this works in the browser. With the filtering select in the Dojo combo box, we can choose to limit how many things appear in the dropdown. So you notice that we have a fairly extensive list of U.S. states here. So I can select one, or I can just start typing. I can start typing in like new, and it'll give me all of the choices, and I can choose one. And remember, the combo box, I can put in whatever I want. Whereas the filtering select, if I put in something that doesn't match in the drop-down list, it's going to give me a error indication. So it's saying, you know, you got to use the state that's in the list. Here we have a limit of 4, so I can set it to kind of act like a little pager and page through my choices, so I don't get this case where all the states, you know, drop down to the bottom of the page. I can control how many choices appear in the drop-down. And then we also have the ability to do a label and value pair. So when I switch over to read mode, notice that, you know, everything displays that I selected, but the one with the label value pair, we're seeing California, but actually what is stored in the document was just the abbreviation, CA. Okay, so that's the combo box and the filtering select. There's another variation of the validation text box for numbers. The only difference here is this is designed for numbers, so we can control the, if we want a decimal or percentage or a currency symbol, we can set a pattern, and we can also add a constraint. So if you want the user to only enter in numbers between 1 and 100, we can enter that constraint as well. Let's go look at that in Designer. So we have our regular edit box at the top. Here we have our number text box. And again, we have now the ability to add a constraint. So I can enter between 0 and 100 in this case. And the first one is a decimal. And then I have some that are set up for percent and currency. Let's go look at those. So if I put in a number, again, we get the prompt to help us. But if I don't listen and put something outside that range, it will give me an error and can prompt me. For the percent, I can put in like 45%, or if I just put in 0.45, it will automatically add the percent sign as soon as I cursor out of the field. If I put in a currency amount, as soon as I cursor out of the field, it will add the decimals and the currency symbol. And we can also have it specify the USD instead of the symbol. Let me put something here. If I switch over to read mode, notice that our percentage and our currencies lose their formatting. So these Dojo number list box or text box, it's only for editing. That all this formatting goes away in read mode. So you might want to use a computed control and control how you want the formatting in read mode. It's going to be a little different. Okay, and the spinner is going to work the same way. We saw that before. This is kind of just a variation of the Dojo number text box, but we can add a spinner. So if we look at that, we can add our spinner. I'll just go right into preview. And so we can use the spinner. The default is when I use the up and down arrows, it's only going to increment it by 1. But there is a property that when I use the up and down arrows, we can control how much it increments or decrements by. And that property is called the small delta. And then if I use the page up and page down keys, there's another property called large delta that can control that. So this bottom one, this small delta, it's 10, so it increases by 10 when I use the little up and down arrows. If I use the page up and page down key, it increments by 100. Again, in read mode, this all disappears and we just see the actual value. And then we also have sliders. Sliders are just a way where the user slides the slider to get the value they want. One thing about this is it's a little more complicated in that, first of all, if you want to get the labels, you have to use a slider rule labels. It's another control. And then you also have these little hash marks are called slider rules. So when you add the slider to your XPage, it will ask you if you want the labels or the rules, and if you want them to the left or right, in the case of vertical, or horizontal, which is a different control for the slider, it can be above or below. When the user slides the slider, they won't see the actual value. There's no way to see the value that they're sliding to. But what we can do is add a computed field, and we can then get the value with the onChange event, client-side JavaScript, and the code is here at the bottom on the slide. And by the way, all these demos that I'm showing you, the demo database, as Paul mentioned, will be made available to you. And each slide cross-references the demo. So when you want to go look at this in more detail later on, this is going to be the demo 250 slider XPage. That's going to be in the XPages database. All the demos are in the XPages database that you're going to download. The other databases are used for just data. So you see all the XPages are here. And in this particular case, it's the demo 250 slider. And so we have a number of sliders on the page. There's 3 vertical, 3 horizontal, and they're just set up differently in terms of the slider rules and slider rule labels. And then the bottom one has that computed field I mentioned, that when we change this slider, it runs some code that will get the value from the slider and write it out to that computed field. Again, that's client-side JavaScript. So we'll preview this, and I'll set a couple of these. So we can set them by dragging, or we can use the up and down arrows. And you see some of these have slider rules and slider rule labels. And when I change this bottom one, you see the value is in that computed field. And when I go to read mode, all those sliders disappear and just show the value that was selected. Okay,
Howard, if you could pass it over to me.
I will do that. Okay, so Paul's going to pick up and talk to you about the dialog controls.
Okay, so there's a couple of dialog controls here. And Howard, we may have to skip some of these to make up some time. Just want to introduce one of the main dialog controls, the dialog control. So this is a modal dialog. It has some related controls. These are optional, but you can have a dialog button bar to add your buttons and dialog content for the main content of your dialog. The dialog control is opened or closed by a code. So client-side JavaScript, XSP open or close dialog, and server-side JavaScript gets your component, your dialog ID using get component, and then show or hide it. On the close or hide options or methods, you do have the opportunity to specify the ID of the area on your XPage for a partial refresh. So let's see this in action. Okay, and this is the 310 demo. And I'm looking at a document within this input XPage, and I can click on this edit address to open up the dialog, and I can delete everything and try to save that. So you can put validation within your controls within your dialog. So let's cancel that and try that again. And I'll just make a valid change this time and change that to road, the abbreviation. Okay, so that's a partial refresh on that area of my dialog. So let's take a look at this in Designer. And what we have on this XPage. First of all, we have a Domino document data source, document 1 defined for this XPage. And all of these computed fields that I saw at the top of my form table, they are bound to the appropriate fields within that data source, so to the address field and to the city field and so on. Now, here's my dialog control, dialog 1, and it has input controls that are also bound to the same types of fields, document1.address, okay, and city and state and so on. To open up my dialog 1 control, I've got some code in this link, okay, and basically, first changing the document into edit mode and then executing this script, getting the component dialog1 and .show to show it. And some of the buttons here to cancel changes, getting the component dialog 1 and hide it. To save changes, first doing a document 1.save, getting the component dialog 1, hiding it, and passing that panel ID, read-only customer details, to do a partial refresh on that panel. So that's how that was done. Okay, Howard, I think we're over to you. Howard, I don't think we're hearing you right now.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay, so the value picker is a way to present a dialog to the user to select a value. And this is very similar to what we had for the Notes client with the dialog list and a number of other types of control, not really controls, but types of fields that you could add in the Notes client. With the in addition to the value picker, there's also a name picker we're not going to cover today, but there's a number of other pickers that you can use. The value picker itself has 3 ways to provide data for it. So you can either use a simple value picker, a domino view value picker, which is going to go to a domino view, or a bean value picker, where the choices for the data will come from a Java bean. So the simple value picker, you can either hard code your choices or you can write some server-side JavaScript to compute those. And this value picker is only for selection. It's just going to put up the dialog. We're actually going to have to bind it to another control, like an edit box, that's going to, whatever value the user selects, it's going to put that value into the edit box that it's bound to. We can still do the label value pairs. One thing to point out is that when you use the domino view value picker data provider and you specify a label column, the value it's going to store is always the first sorted column in the view. We can also have single or multiple values, you know, checkboxes, and there's a searching capability as well. So let's go look at this. I get a number of value pickers. So what the value picker is here is this little magnifying glass to the right of the edit box. So this first value picker here is bound to input text 1, which is the edit box control to the left of the value picker. So in this case of the first one, our data provider is a simple value picker, red, green, and blue. And we have a comma between those, and we specify the value of separator. Our next one uses a domino view. So it goes to a domino view in the parts database to supply the data. Again, the for property is what it's bound to. Another one here is the multiple. So the way we set the multiple is in the edit box. There is a property for multiple separator, a comma, that tells the value picker to let them pick multiple values. And then we can choose checkboxes. There's a way to set up type ahead and searching in the value picker. Let's go look at these and see how they work. Simple value picker, that's just our red, green, and blue. That was our hard-coded values. The view one, we can select something from the view. The other one that's multiple, I also chose not to use the magnifying glass and give it some text instead, and I can pick multiple values. The checkbox is just going to give me a checkbox next to the value. The type ahead would let me start typing in a value, and then it will show me everything that matches that was also present in the value picker. So there's a way to link those together. So the user has 2 ways to enter the information. And then searching is we just get a little search in the value picker. We can put in like ladies to look for all the golf carts that have ladies in them, and then it's going to narrow down the list of choices. Okay, we can also, because we were binding this to our edit box, we can also have the edit box use a special validator called a picker validator that's going to tell the edit box to make sure whatever the user types in the edit box is in the value picker that it's associated with. Basically, we just give it the same data provider as we did for a value picker. And there's a demo there that you can play with on your own. And then there's also something called a Dojo list text box. So instead of using a edit box, we can use a Dojo list text box, and the value picker is going to be used to supply the values. So let me just demonstrate that. So here is our picker. We're going to use that, and then our Dojo list text box is going to hold our value. This is what's actually bound to our data. So when we look at this in our browser, we got our magnifying glass. Notice there was no place for me to type in anything, but I can select, in this case, multiple values. When I click OK, in the Dojo list text box, it puts these values in there, and I have a little X that I can remove values. And if I go into read mode, it still keeps them in little boxes, but doesn't have the X. So that's a nice way to let the user select multiple values and not let them type anything in. The tooltip and tooltip dialog, I think we're going to go over to Paul for this one. Let me
yes, thanks, Howard.
Switch over. I guess it didn't switch over. Try it again. There we go.
Okay, next two dialog controls, the tooltip dialog, or the tooltip and the tooltip dialog control. Both of these are non-modal controls, so the user can click elsewhere on the page to get rid of them. And they're both, the tooltip dialog, it's a little different. It's kind of like a dialog. It's opened via code. There are two flavors of the tooltip dialog. The simple tooltip dialog, where you just specify what you want to pop up in the tooltip in the label property. And that's what we're seeing in the left code. And on the right, the complex tooltip, where everything that you want to pop up, you simply put between the start and end tag for your tooltip. So let's see that. First of all, let's see it in action. And I have it in this demo 350 XPage. And as I hover over, I'm seeing, for the row variable for this repeat control where I'm showing this view data, I'm seeing the phone number for those various customers. Now, on the complex side, seeing a little bit more information. I'm seeing the contact. Basically, I'm seeing a table with some labels, contact, city, and phone, and the appropriate values, for each row entry within that particular repeat. So how is that done? Okay, so for my simple tooltip here on the left, you simply specify what you want to display in the label property. You also specify the for field. In this case, computed 1, and that is the target where the tooltip will display. You can also specify where it's rendered as well in the position property. For this complex tooltip, I don't have a label property. The complex tooltip will result in an AJAX call to your server, and you must specify dynamic content equals true to enable that. What you might also want to do is specify the show delay. The default is to show the tooltip after 400 milliseconds. I've moved that up to a second because I don't want to keep doing that AJAX call to the server just as they're kind of moving slowly or hovering slowly over pages. But you notice that there is no label property. If I go to the source, basically everything you want in that complex tooltip you need to put between your start and end tags for the tooltip. Okay, so our next dialog control, the tooltip dialog. So what is this? Am I a tooltip? Am I a dialog? I'm so confused. Well, it certainly has some characteristics of both. So like a tooltip, it is non-modal. Like a dialog, it's open via code, client side and server side. And also like, I guess your complex tooltip, there is no label property. So you specify whatever you want to show between the opening and close tags. And this is just showing some of the differences between the dialog control, the main difference, modal versus non-modal, and where it opens and so on. So let's take a quick look at this example here. And on this X page, let's just demonstrate it. I have both. So in a repeat control, I'm repeating some view data, and I can edit the Arnold's Golf entry, okay, right here. And actually, let's choose the phone number, something I can see in the view, and save that with a dialog. So that's a modal dialog, can't click anywhere else, or with a tooltip dialog. And with the tooltip dialog, there's a target area where it appears, and also non-modal, so I can click elsewhere. And if you think about it, that's probably not a good application here, because the user might think that, in fact, they are making changes here, and when they click somewhere else, they might think that those changes were saved. So really not a good choice for this particular application. Also, I'm not too thrilled about, the way I had to find, the right link in the right column or row to edit that particular entry. So really not the right type of dialog for this in-view editing. But Howard, I think you've got a control that might be better suited here. So let me pass over to you.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Let's see, where's the, oh, there it is, okay. WebEx is hiding something on me. Okay, hopefully you're seeing my screen. So the in-place form is a really cool control because it's going to, instead of being a dialog that appears on top of your X page, it's going to appear right in line. And it's just going to shift everything down on the page to make room for it. The way we're going to open this and close it is via server-side JavaScript. There is no client-side JavaScript option. So you have the code here, show and a hide. There's also a toggle. So if it's open, it'll be closed. If it's closed, it'll be open. And then there's also a Boolean method to determine if the in-place form is being shown or not. So let's go look at this. So here we have a repeat, and in the repeat we have a couple of rows of information that we're displaying. And then we have, let me first just go ahead and demonstrate this. So we have a couple rows of information, and then we have a link for each row of the repeat. There we can edit the customer. So I can go ahead and put in like the city, and I can save it with the save button here, and notice that the city changed, or I can go open and close the in-place form with the link at top, the link right in the row. So what we did here was in the repeat, we have the link. So this is going to be, with the events, this is the toggle to toggle the in-place form. And the in-place form is right in our repeat where we have, if you look in the outline here in the bottom left, we have the in-place form that has our controls and has our buttons, and that is inside a panel that's bound to the data that's inside our repeat. So we can, right in line, show that dialog, and the user can open and close it with either the save and cancel button or the other link. Another way to do this is with the data view Paul showed you before. So we can have a data view, and then in that extra details area, we can have a link to open up a in-place form, and then we can go ahead and put some information in, and we can edit right in our view. So kind of like that in-place view editing that we had in the Notes client, and we start to move away from that concept of show the user a page with the view. Now have them open up another page with the document and then return back to the view. We can start to do everything on one page in the browser, which is going to make for a much nicer user experience. Okay, so that's what we showed before. Real quick on navigation controls, we'll touch upon this again next month in the application layout. But to create navigation in your application, there's about a dozen navigation type controls. And we highlighted these on the slide. There's a lot of you have probably seen tag clouds. There's a tag cloud control. There's pop-up menus. There's outlines. There's a way to do breadcrumbs. So you got a whole bunch of different controls. One of the most useful one that is very useful with the application layout control is called the navigator. The nice thing about the navigator is that it will highlight the entry right in the navigator itself that the user currently clicked on. Now, when we work with most of these navigation type controls, we're going to use something called tree nodes. And tree nodes are the way we're going to supply the values in the list that the user can navigate to. So there's a basic leaf node that can be used to just create a label and then a submitted value. We'll see that in a second, how that's used. There's a way to get everything from a domino view. That's a domino view entries tree node. There's a way to get a list of all the domino views in a database. There's a way to navigate to another XPage. That's called the page tree node. There's a way to log in and log out. It's a login tree node. Show the user their username. It's the user tree node. So a number of different tree nodes that we can use to build the list. And what we're going to do is use, in every navigation control, there's going to be an on-item quick event. So there's one of these for the entire control. And each of those tree nodes has a submit value property. And so we can use either client-side JavaScript or server-side JavaScript to get what the user clicked on and then take the appropriate action. Client-side JavaScript is the xsp.getSubmitValue. Server-side JavaScript is the context.getSubmittedValue. So that's what we can use to get what the user actually clicked on. Looking at that in Designer. So here we have actually an outline control, and in the outline control in our properties, we have these tree nodes. And looking at just one of them, we just give it a label property, label 1, and we give it a submit value, and we did that for the other 3 as well. And in the event for this navigator, for this outline, we use the server-side JavaScript context.getSubmittedValue. That's going to get the submit value property, and then we just write it out to a computed field. So when we go look at this, we have our outline, and when we click on it, it just supplies the value to the computed field. The navigator control, we're going to touch more on this in the next webinar on the application layout control, but this is going to provide a nice navigation like you see in the diagram. And when we use this in conjunction with the page tree node, it will highlight whatever the user selected as they navigate to different XPages. So just a quick example of how this would work. We have 3 related XPages here, XPage 621A, B, and C. Each of these XPages use a application layout control, and we have a custom control that the navigator is in. So they all share the same navigator. And when we look at the custom control, we can open that up and we see here's our navigator control. And this navigator control uses the tree nodes. So we have 3 tree nodes to navigate to these 3 different XPages. So we give it a label, and we specify what XPage to navigate to. And then when we do that, let's go preview one of these. When we do that, we have our navigator on the left. And as I click on the different entries, it changes the XPage that I'm viewing. And notice that whatever the user clicked on in the navigator is highlighted. So that's the nice thing about using the navigator control with the page tree node. It will automatically provide that selection for you. Otherwise, you have to write some code to turn on and off what is selected. Okay, so I'm going to turn over to Paul and talk about the toolbar control.
Okay, Howard.
Let's see.
So toolbar control, you want to use this, and while Howard's sharing his screen with me, you want to use this where you would use an action bar in your form design or your view design. Okay, so that functionality, those actions, you would migrate those to a toolbar control. And what I'm seeing here on this X page is I'm seeing a view. This is just a domino view displayed in a view panel control, but I've got options to, delete some of the selected customers, and I can create a new customer. If I open up one of these, now I'm looking at an X page that's showing a domino with a domino document data source. So I've got in a toolbar control the option to switch to edit mode. You see these icons that are displayed as well. So there's a sprite that's available with dozens and dozens of really useful icons for saving this little icon here or canceling your changes and so on. Okay, so let's take a look at that in Designer. So this is my X page with the toolbar control, and that's what it looks like in Designer. And once again, just like our other navigators, it has a tree nodes property. And when I expand some of these, this is the tree node that submits, that has the title or the label, save and return to view, and it's submitting the value save, okay? This is the classes for that particular icon. Okay, so the sprite is digit editor icon, and the specific offset that I want, just showing that particular image, is digit editor icon save. So really quite useful, very efficient way of surfacing those icons in your controls. So let's take a look at one more of these. This is the one that with the label edit, and its submit value is edit mode. So once again, in the events, there's only one on-item click event for this type of navigator control. And the way you do this was done with simple actions and action groups, and each one of these action groups has a condition. So this one here, which is going to change to edit mode, its condition is get the submitted value, context.get submitted value, and if that's edit mode, then yes, execute this action. For this next one here, the one that's going to save the document and return to my view, its condition is context.get submitted value, and if that is equal to save, then yes, execute that action group to actually save the document and return to the view. So that's how that was done. Okay. Now, we do not have time to get into the application layout control, so I'm just going to introduce it. We're going to cover this in detail in our next seminar on March 13th. It has 6 facet areas and 5 bar areas, and this is a very important control. Basically, this ties it all together. So the navigation control provides the navigation, the layout, and the structure of your overall application. Like our other navigator type controls, there's only one on-item click for all of the areas in the control. And the way you implement this is basically you define one custom control with your application layout control within it. And then once you've designed the layout, once you've designed what tabs you want and what the labels of those tabs are, then you will add that into each of the X pages for that application. So just a very quick demo of that. So what I see here is I see there are 6, 7 X pages that start with demo 761, and all of those have within them this application layout control, this demo 761 app layout control. And if I look at some of the properties here, I see that on the title bar, I see a page link node to open up a particular page, this customer by name view XSP, and it has this label. That's going to be the label of the tab, customer application, and another tab called sales application, opening up another X page. So let's just preview that. Preview one of these. And, here's the effect. So I can, switch to my different X pages, and I see a navigator control that's being highlighted to show me the context where I'm actually at. I can switch to another Domino application using these tabs, okay, and switch to the various applications. But I see a nice tie-in of all of those components. Okay, so I can see my data view component, and when I'm opening up a document, I'm seeing a form table, and all of that tied together through the application layout. So do come back next month, and we'll show you how to do that. Howard?
Okay, thanks, Paul. So the other advantage of the application layout control is, I think so far everything you've seen, Paul, you can switch up. Everything you've seen today with the application layout control use the IBM One UI theme, and there's different colors and variations of the IBM One UI theme. So just to kind of review, this is kind of the way the application layout control looks like that Paul just showed you. But suppose I go into my Domino Designer and I don't really change the design. I just go to the XSP properties and I change the theme to use the Bootstrap theme. So when I do that and come back and refresh my page, again, I didn't touch the design of this X page. Notice that it looks totally different. It now uses the Bootstrap theme. And we still have the tabs at the top and the navigator on the left. But if I make this browser window narrower, like let's say if it was on a mobile device or a tablet, notice that the navigator on the left moved above the view. So everything's still functional, but it's able to be responsive to the type of device that it is and can adjust itself. So when it's a desktop browser, it looks like this. When it gets a little narrower, it can resize and move that left navigator, and if we were using the right column, it would move that as well. So that's the Bootstrap for XPages project. So that is available on OpenNTF, and there's a couple of different Bootstrap themes. The latest is the 3.0. And so that's something you can get on OpenNTF and apply that to your application. And then when you use the application layout control, it will make that have the Bootstrap theme. Okay, I think we're up to the Q&A part. Just as I mentioned before, you can get the demo database at this URL. This will be in your slides. It's tlcc.com/February or FEB-webinar. And that link will be in the email we send you as well as in the slides that you can download. Obviously, we only spent an hour and a half here and went through just some of the controls very quickly. There's a lot more that you can learn, and as well as a lot more detail about what we've covered today. And that's all in our course, Rapid XPages Development Using Application Layout in Dojo UI Controls. It's a long name for a course that actually is a fairly full course of 4 days of content. If you were to go through that nonstop for 4 days, 8 hours a day. And that's on sale right now through the end of the month. And the links are on the slides. Okay, we have a number of questions already. And so we'll take some of your questions. You can use the Q&A pane to ask those. Paul, are you ready with some questions?
Yes, I am. Okay. So I'll answer some questions that were addressed at my section. So Rupinder asks, can I use the data view control to show search results? Yes, you can. And Greg asks, can you add a search control into the header of a data view control, so into one of the facets of the data view control? You know, I haven't tried that. I'm sure that you could, but the way you would actually do that is with an application layout control. So if you do use the application layout control, there is a search bar, and there's also a search facet. So that is probably the way that you would want to approach it. I've got another question. I'm going to give you a chance, Howard, to search for some questions, but another one related to the save state. For the pager save state, will that work with a checkbox selection? Will it actually remember what you checked? You know, I haven't tried that one. I'm going to have to try that one. Another one from Oscar: does the pager save state work on mobile apps? When you're using the mobile controls to display a domino view, you do use the data view control. I have not tried it. Okay, so I haven't tried it in the single page app component of a mobile application, and that's another thing to try. I don't know, Howard, if you can comment on that one.
The pager save state?
Yeah, with the single page app mobile controls.
Yeah, I believe we have that in our mobile course, don't we?
Did we do that?
Yes, I think so.
I think you are right. Yeah. Okay, so the answer to that one is yes. Howard, do you have some?
Yes, I have a few. Philip asked, what's the maximum amount of data for the value picker? And I don't really think there's a limit. I mean, in terms of what the value picker shows, you obviously don't want to display a couple 100,000 entries. But then whatever you put in the domino field that it's bound to, obviously will have some limitations from domino. You have the 32K or 64K limit of what can go in a individual domino field on the back end. But in terms of the XPage part, there shouldn't be any limits. And then we had another question from Dave. In the in-page edit, are we using any hide lens? And that's something I didn't really mention, but the in-page edit, when you click the button to display the in-page edit, for example, I had that in a repeat and also in a data view, that it's dynamically creating that content and sending it down to the browser. So it's not refreshing the whole page, it's just doing that one part. And all that, those controls are not in memory until the user actually clicks on something to fire off that server-side JavaScript to display that inform edit control. Paul, do you have a couple?
Yes. Back to the data view, Richard asks, can the detail expand the entire line, or is it limited to the extra columns on the right? And yes, it is limited. So when you add extra columns on the right, for each extra column that you're adding in right aligned, but they are consuming some of your space that you can show in your summary column and your details column. So they're going to butt up to how many extra columns you have. So really, since you can show all the detail that you need in the details column, you can get away from using those extra columns and get away from that paradigm where a view really does have that tabular format. Howard?
Okay, we had a quick question. Both Paul and I were using Domino 9. However, everything should still work on 853 the same way because we've used all these controls on 853. The only thing is you need the extension library. And there was another question. In using Domino 9, there's nothing extra you need to set up or download for anything that we showed today. Everything is included in Domino 9. So that is the nice thing about moving to Domino 9. Another question, and we'll just take a few more. Can you dynamically create tree nodes? And those were what we saw in the navigation type controls. And there is one tree node that can be tied to Java code. So you could dynamically create the tree nodes that way. There's also a repeat tree node. So you could use a repeat to create them. And then, as I demonstrated, you can tie them into a domino view as well. Paul, do you have?
I think we're close to getting caught up, and I think we're at time here. Question from Dave here. Can you add a search control that searches multiple databases and searches that into a single X page, on the single X page? I don't think you can. I mean, you can certainly specify which X page, and I'm talking about the application layout control. You can certainly specify the X page that you want to display your search results, and it can be the same X page or another X page that you're searching on. But I'm not sure how you would search across multiple views.
Well, you could do that.
How did that work? Did you do that?
You could do that in code and search through multiple databases and merge your results into some sort of Java data set or an array or whatever you want, and then point that towards a repeat or a view panel control. So you could do that. But there isn't a search control off the shelf unless there's something on OpenNTF. This would be something you just have to write the code for.
Okay. I think we're a little over time.
Okay.
Want to wrap up, Howard?
I think we'll wrap up at this point. Remember, next month we'll spend a lot more time on application layout control. We'll devote a whole hour to that. And don't forget that we have a sale going on, as well as Team Studio has a promotion going on for iPad Mini if you try out their one product. And then also, if you're in Europe, check out the Engage user conference on March 17th and 18th. That's going to be held in Breda in the Netherlands. So I'd like to thank everyone for attending today. And Courtney, did you have any final words?
Just thank you everyone for attending, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar on March 13th.
Okay, everyone have a great rest of your day. Thanks for attending.